I want to bring into the conversation now attorney Susham M. Susham, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now from Fox. Of course, we've talked about this before here on our program, but I want to start with the very basics. For someone who's not even aware of what's going on with birthright citizenship in this country, can you first sort of explain what birthright citizenship is to us here in America and how it's been used in the past to grant those born on American soil citizenship?
Sure, Christina. Thanks for having me back on. First, just to take a step back, birthright citizenship comes from the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution under this principle called jus soli, which is if you're born here, you're basically a U.S. citizen subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So that quote, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, is what's being really debated in the courts. What does that mean? Typically speaking, except for really limited rare cases like affecting Native American Indians, for example, or others, almost always it's meant that if you're born here in the U.S., you're a U.S. citizen. There's a famous case called the ARC case that dealt with the Chinese Exclusion Act, like Chinese that were removed. And there's someone that was born to two Chinese parents, and that was litigated of whether they were a U.S. citizen or not. And the Supreme Court, merely a few years after the Constitution was amendments were ratified, the Supreme Court had ruled that, in fact, that person is a U.S. citizen. So just to take a step back, the Supreme Court has not ruled on the merits of this case, of the executive order, and whether they can get rid of birthright citizenship in this circumstance. The Supreme Court has only ruled on the issue of whether courts could or could not put it on hold.
And so with that being a major development, I have to ask you, Susham, where does this go from here? This latest move, as you said, made an exception there within the Supreme Court. What happens next? We've been feeling like we're in limbo in a sort of sense with birthright citizenship, with the executive order being signed earlier this year, now moving through this court process.
Yeah, excellent question. I mean, the Supreme Court really attacked in their decision what's called universal injunctions, the ability for district courts to put executive order or a law on hold while it's being debated throughout the court system before it reaches the Supreme Court. And that's what the Supreme Court really didn't want, is the judges to have the power to put decisions on hold. And those universal injunctions were what were really put on hold, not the merits of the case, of whether it's constitutional or unconstitutional. I personally believe it is going to be found unconstitutional because of the ARC case and constitutional law. But the Supreme Court hasn't actually ruled at all on the merits. They attacked that universal injunction. Now, what they left the door open to, even within the majority opinion of the Supreme Court, is other ways to put the law on hold, such as class actions. And that's what we have here, is a class action lawsuit now been filed in district court. And that's what a district judge has put on hold. It's a different avenue than a universal injunction. And that's what's put the latest decision of the President Trump's executive order on hold.